In the silent void between three dead moons, a fortress of chains guards a prisoner whose very name once silenced armies. For 3 centuries, he has not stirred. But tonight, a child no taller than his claws walks through locked doors that refuse to stop her. Alarms scream, soldiers freeze, and with nothing more than a tin whistle in her hand, she whispers to the galaxy's most feared dragon, one word that could change everything. Grandfather. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The Ember Vault floated like a held breath between the Ashen Triad. 3 moons so quiet, the dust on their plains never moved. Chains of graphite iron kept the vault steady, each link thick as a shuttle's spine. No sunrise ever touched this place, and the dark made engineers speak softly, as if sound itself might break the glass of reality. Marshal Davin walked his ritual path with the same patient steps he had taken every dawn for 30 years. He checked energy readings, read the night log, and watched the feed that stared into the heart of the vault where a single being slept. Kalor, the storm singer, lay coiled in silence behind layered fields and lattices that hummed like bees trapped in crystal. Stories claimed his voice could twist weather, bend vessels, and pull tides from barren moons. None of that matched the creature Davin saw, a figure dulled by time, wings folded, eyes closed, tail resting like a river that had forgotten to flow. The shift felt routine until Lieutenant Briar rubbed his temples and said, "Sir, camera 12 is wrong." "Define wrong," Davin replied, not looking away from his tablet. "We has motion in corridor E," Briar said, "but the corridor shows empty. Also, the system thinks it is performing a scheduled sweep that we did not schedule." Tech analyst Vi Lo flicked through windows on her console. She had a habit of whispering to machines. "No intrusion flags. We're green by the book." She paused. "But look at this. Access doors are opening in sequence without a token. The logs say the doors are already open, as if they were never closed to begin with." There she was on the next monitor. A small girl in a faded blue dress, hair gathered in 2 loose ties, one lace of her left shoe trailing like a comet's tail. She walked with the easy certainty of someone returning to a familiar room. The turrets did not track her. The scanners did not care she breathed. The alarms, however, screamed their bright, hungry notes. Marshal Davin felt his stomach shift. "Containment squads to Corridor E. Non-lethal intercept. I want her stopped, not harmed." The squads ran, but when they reached Checkpoint 1, their bodies refused to obey the last step. Later, a sergeant swore it was like trying to step through a memory that did not belong to him. The girl looked up at each guard with steady brown eyes, and they remembered birthdays, soup on cold nights, someone kissing a scraped knee. That was enough. Muscle gave up its argument, and the squads found themselves stepping aside, silent and embarrassed. Velo's voice shook. "Marshal, the Vault Corps is acknowledging a command that didn't come from us." "From who then?" Davin asked. "It looks like it came from internal architecture, like the building itself had an idea." The girl moved through the last security door, which swung open before she lifted her hand. She hummed a thin tune, simple and old. It rode the air the way dust rides sunbeams you cannot see here. In her right palm, she clutched a small tin whistle. The metal, cheap and scratched, caught the dim light and threw it back like a promise. "We have to stop her," Briar said, throat tight. "We tried," a guard murmured over comms, "and I do not know why we cannot." The command floor smelled like metal heat as system messages burst across every display. Havenlight Condition Beta. Acknowledge. No one had trained for that phrase. No one had even heard it aloud. Inside the chamber, the child walked to the last door, a wall of woven titanium and sound. She lifted the tin whistle and pressed the cool tube to her cheek, the way children press trusted toys. The alarms did not drown her voice. "Grandfather," she said softly, "I found you. I brought your song." On cue, the field did not fail. It changed. The tense hum slackened, like a knot gently untying itself. Lights dimmed to a warmer shade. In the observation slit, something brightened that was not a bulb. Kaylor's eyes opened, clear as amber in spring. There was no roar, no show of teeth, only an inhale like distant surf. Marshall Davin stood at the glass and felt years slide from his shoulders and pool at his boots. The dragon lifted his head, slow and careful, as if the air might crack. Scales that had dulled over centuries hinted at hidden color beneath the rust. He bent until his gaze met the child's. "Little Reed," Kaylor said, voice like cedar wind through an empty hall. "How far you have wandered." The command floor went silent, the way people go silent in the first snowfall. Velo did not blink. Briar forgot to close his mouth. Davin pressed his hand against the glass and realized it was the first time in decades he had touched the chamber with anything other than suspicion. "I followed the lullaby," the child said. "Mother said you would hear it if I brought it back." She held up the whistle. "I learned the notes so I could find the door that people forgot how to open." Kaylor's eyes shone. The outer chains tightened, then eased like a ship shifting at anchor. Another system message crawled across every screen. "Havenlight Alpha, stand by." Marshall Davin whispered, "What in all the Black Seas is Havenlight?" No one answered, because all of them were watching the impossible scene turn the vault from a cage into something that felt, strangely, like a room in a home long locked and now opened. And somewhere near the rim of known space, a sensor buoy woke from sleeping duty and sent a thin pulse. In the empty night beyond, something old and hungry turned its attention toward the Ember Vault and listened to the song of a child. The second morning began with coffee left untouched, because every console sang the same soft notice: "Havenlight is active." The font looked ordinary, like a power bill or a weather advisory, which made it feel even stranger. Ordinary text for an extraordinary shift. Marshall Davin met the girl in the chamber's outer hall. Close up, she looked like any child who had climbed too many stairs, cheeks flushed, hair tie slipping. She cradled the tin whistle the way others carry stuffed bears. He crouched to meet her eyes. "I'm Marshall Davin," he said. "This is not a place for visitors." "I'm Nora," she replied, simple as a knock. "The vault called me." She pointed toward the inner door. "And my grandfather did." The inner door folded away without command. Kaylor lowered his head again, careful and deliberate, as if the room had become a fragile shell. Davin's body told him to step back, yet his boots did not move. Not fear, he realized, but a different sort of awe, like walking into a library where the books hum their stories before you open them. "The chains can rest," Kaylor said, and the overhead pulleys sighed in answer. "No storm rides my breath." His gaze drifted past Nora to Davin. "You have kept your post with devotion. You did not know you watched over a seed instead of a sword." "With respect," Davin said, finding his voice. "The record calls you a breaker of worlds." "Records remember what fear feeds them," Kaylor replied gently. "In the old years, humans and dragons flew as twins. We were the long sight to your quick hands. Then the Void Eaters came, and fear needed a simple shape to blame. We wore that shape so your people would not turn upon each other. Velo had slipped into the room, hands hovering near her tablet as if a wrong tap might bruise the air. If that is true, why the prison? Not prison, Kaelor said. A harbor disguised as a cage. Havenlight was the hidden name. When the right voice came, the harbor would light its signal fires. Before Davin could ask more, a shuttle's bright silhouette kissed the docking ring. A path opened through steel like the Red Sea parting for a story none of them had read in decades. The woman who walked in wore a dark uniform with only a few bars of color. Her hair, streaked with silver, was pulled back. Her eyes held a quiet the crew recognized from long nights near silent instruments. She spoke before anyone saluted. "Admiral Celine Hart," she said, "stand down. I am here to confirm that Havenlight is not a myth." The Admiral looked at Nora and then at Kaelor. Grief flickered and then turned into something brighter. "It chose you," she said to the child, not as a question. Nora nodded. "I followed Mother's stories. She said the vault would listen if I remembered the tune." "Your mother served in my fleet," Hart replied softly. She kept the last pages of truth folded inside her coat. Briar broke the delicate spell with a crackle of comms. "Marshal, edge sensors report large biosignatures near the outer marches, moving in patterns that look practiced." Hart's head tilted, as if she could hear through meters of metal. "Void eaters," she said. 3 centuries out there, growing fat on unattended light." She looked to Kaelor. "And now they test the door again." Kaelor's wings shifted, a slow unfurling that moved air like a tide. Even folded back again, the gesture changed the room. "We cannot meet them as we were," he said. "We must meet them as we were meant to be." Nora watched them both, expression serious. She raised the tin whistle and played 3 soft notes. The sound ran along the walls like a bright thread. Monitors warmed from blue to gold. Velo's tablet displayed pathways that looked less like circuits and more like maps of old walking trails. "What are those?" Velo whispered. "Resonance routes," Hart said. "Ways humans and dragons used to coordinate without choking on our differences." No one believed they were real. Davin felt the weight of 3 decades of certainty slip sideways. It did not fall. It became a different sort of weight, like an oath accepted rather than a guardrail clung to. "If we open the harbor," he asked, "who will come?" "The hidden," Kaelor replied. "Those who kept their voices low, so fear would not find them. They are listening for this signal." Velo's console bloomed with contacts. Dragon shapes unfolded from dark pockets between moons and dust lanes, wings marked by old scars and by fresh, gleaming edges. They did not charge. They circled, holding to the space beyond weapons range like respectful guests who wait to be invited in. Davin looked to Hart. She nodded once. "Open the bay. Signal the council that Havenlight is enacted. I will take command of joint operations." Then, softer, to Kaelor. "Can you still sing the harmonies?" "I can," he said. "And I will sing them until the ones with broken mouths remember their true names." Nora took a step forward and placed the tin whistle on the floor between them, as if setting a rule in a game. "No one yells," she said. "No one lies. We listen and we help." The authority in her small voice was not force. It was steadiness. Everyone in the room agreed without the need for votes. Over the next 40 hours, the Ember Vault changed skin. Brig doors became supply holes. Narrow corridors widened into shared spaces. Engineers and dragon crafters retuned engines and woven bones into tools that answered both breath and code. Dr. Samir Okoye, the chief medic, discovered that a diluted solution of what he called bright tears knit damaged tissue fast, without leaving hard scars. The dragons learned to fit into hangars without panic. The humans learned that a low rumble could mean contentment instead of threat. Marshal Davin walked the new path with another kind of vigilance. He watched meals shared on the cargo deck. He watched young pilots swap stories with dragon fledglings, awkward at first, and then suddenly warm. He watched Kaelor sleep for the first time, not as a prisoner, but as a grandparent, within earshot of a child who hummed herself into dreams. When the first Void Eater scouts slipped near the outer mines, the joint fleet was still clumsy. Yet even clumsy, they responded as more than two sides. The scouts slipped away after tasting the edge of this new shape. Nora stood at a map table and pointed to the blackest sector. "If I were hungry and afraid," she said, "I would hide there and gather strength." The room stilled as the grown-ups understood a new truth. Simple wisdom could be a compass when complex charts failed. In the humming quiet that followed, Kaelor lowered his head beside Nora and said, "Little Reed, I think you are the harbor's true lantern." And no one disagreed. The days that followed felt like someone had opened a window in a house that had been shut too long. Air moved, new smells mixed with old, oil and spice, ozone and dragon moss, hot soup and warm scale. The Ember Vault, once a machine of keeping out, learned the art of welcoming in. Admiral Hart formed the first bridge wings, pairs of pilots and dragons selected not for perfect skill, but for patience, humor, and the ability to apologize. A young pilot named Juno Wade met a silver-green drake called Larkmirror. Their first flight looked like two dancers learning steps with different music in their heads. They corrected, collided gently, laughed, tried again. By evening, they were tracing arcs that made the hangar crews applaud. Dr. Okoye, sleeves rolled, moved between medbay and training decks with a quiet smile. He studied the bright tears and put them to careful use, healing stress breaks and old injuries. Always mindful that medicine without respect becomes a blade. "We do not erase pain," he told his team. "We help bodies remember how to finish healing." Marshal Davin's old post transformed. He still woke early, still read logs, still walked the rounds. But now his reports included notes like, "Pair C3 prefer soft lighting during debriefs," and kitchen staff learned to simmer the sea leaf stew. Dragons and humans both returned for seconds. He found that small kindnesses carried more weight than extra locks. Nora did not hold any rank, yet people sought her counsel. She sat on stairwells during shift changes, heel tapping to the ticking of pipes, and listened. She found words that calmed bruised pride and questions that opened stuck minds. She taught a dragon hatchling called Mosswing to count using spare bolts. She taught a nervous mechanic to breathe slow like a bellows before guiding trembling hands toward the work. Kaelor spent afternoons in the long bay, sharing old stories in a voice that made the floorboards hum. He spoke of cloud bridges, of the first harmonies, of cities built with ceilings high enough for friends with wings. He did not paint humans as villains. He named fear, and he named love, and he explained how both could ride the same river. Davin stood at the back most days and let the sounds smooth the corners of his own thoughts. Of course, it was not all ease. During a training run, a rookie gunner fired a burst too close to Larkmirror's belly. The rounds bounced harmlessly, but trust shattered for a time. Apologies were made, then made again, and only after a shared meal on the cargo deck did the crack begin to knit. Another day, a dragon fledgling tried to help cook by making the stove hotter with a puff. The stew surged like a small volcano. Laughter came later, after the cleaning. The Void Eaters tested the borders with patient cruelty. They were less creatures and more hunger shaped like creatures. Half inside the space people knew, and half in a place that made compasses go quiet. They did not roar. They pressed and tasted, retreated and learned. The bridge wings met them, and for the first time in centuries, pushed them back with a chorus instead of a single shout. Nora watched the feeds with her hand resting on the tin whistle. It seemed to steady the data as much as it steadied her. "They do not hate us," she said one evening to Hart and Kaylor. "They do not love us either. They are a song that forgot its tune and now eats anything that might remind it." Hart rubbed her temples, eyes red from long shifts. "So we teach a tune while we defend a home." "Yes," Nora said. "And we do it together, or we do not do it at all." Engineers and dragon crafters built resonance rigs that turned breath into signal and signal into guidance. The rigs hummed like hive music when active. Pilots felt less alone in their cock. Dragons felt less heavy in their bones. Small improvements stacked into true change. Fuel usage lowered, aim sharpened, recovery time between sorties shortened, and above all, fear stopped being the first language people spoke. Marshall Davin wrote to his retired mentor, a simple message he never sent. "I think we were guarding a bridge we could not see." He kept the draft in his pocket and found himself touching it whenever old habits tried to reclaim his spine. Then the day arrived when the Void Eaters did not simply test. 3 harvesters slipped into the Kepler lane, trailing a swarm of thin shadows that cut power from outposts by merely drifting past. The bridge wings launched in waves. Kaylor rose from the long bay with Davin at his side, in a control cradle, fitted along the old dragon's neck ridge, cables running to a command console that translated hand signals into gentle prompts. The fight was sharp and strange. Weapons had to be timed to moments when the harvesters occupied the same slice of reality as the rest of them. The rigs sang. Pilots answered in quick bursts. Dragons shaped breath into arcs of heat that did not burn so much as remind matter how to be itself. The harvesters wavered, then retreated, with a deliberate grace that made Hart frown. "They learned enough," Nora said from the map table, voice steadier than her small hands. "The next wave will aim to break our bridge." Silence followed, heavy but not hopeless. Hart placed a hand on Nora's shoulder. "Then we strengthen it before they return." And so they did. They tuned rigs and refined tactics. They told each other the truth in debriefs, even when truth stung. They practiced new formations that made no sense on paper, yet felt right in bones. They chose trust again and again, until it was not a choice, but a habit. In the quiet hours after drills, Nora sat with Kaylor near a view slit that framed the Ashen Triad. The moons looked like 3 old coins stacked at the edge of a table. "Do you ever wish the world had stayed the way the stories remember it?" she asked. Kaylor's smile was a low curve. "Stories remember the best light. I am grateful for this light now. It is not old. It is ours." When the alert finally came, a signal tall as a mountain from the starless pocket, no one panicked. Hands found stations automatically. Breath slowed. Hearts did what they have always done before storms. They prepared to sing. The broodmother was less a ship and more a wound stitched into the dark. It pulled at nearby rocks until they crumbled into drifting flour. The joint fleet arrived in a lattice pattern, human craft and dragon wings arranged like a net woven by patient hands. The Ember Vault itself had learned to move, reworked into a slow fortress with engines that hummed like low bells. Admiral Hart stood in the command ring, jaw set, eyes clear. "We will not win with speed alone," she said over fleet-wide comms. "We win with steadiness." Nora wore a soft flight vest, adjusted for her small frame. Davin wanted to argue against her presence, but the argument had no breath. Kaelor made a space along his neck ridge where she could stand with a line anchored to a harness. The tin whistle hung from a cord at her throat. She touched it without looking and nodded once. The first wave of Void Eaters moved with unsettling grace, their edges soft as candle smoke, their centers hard as iron magnet. The resonance rigs thrummed. Pilots matched the rhythm. Dragons shaped breath to fill the rig's pattern. Early exchanges gave the fleet a foothold. Then the broodmother pulsed, and the foothold slid. It was a strange attack. The rigs fell half out of tune. Not wrong enough to fail, but wrong enough to turn courage into effort. Ships drifted inches from collision, then jerked out. Dragons flinched at echoes only they could hear. Hart watched the board and understood. The broodmother was not clawing at metal. It was tugging at the thread that tied minds together. "Hold," she said, steady and low. "Do not push. Breathe." Nora closed her eyes and listened past the alarms. She heard fear's old shape, the one that makes hands rush for hammers when a song would do. She brought the tin whistle to her lips, but did not play yet. Instead, she opened her eyes and looked at everyone she could see. Davin with his new duty, Kaelor with his old strength, pilots with sweat at their temples, dragons with patience in their wings. And only then did she breathe the first note. It was not loud. It was calm and clear, the first line of a lullaby that families teach without writing down. The rigs caught it. The dragons carried it. The human heart, hungry for a rhythm that is not panic, remembered how to match it. Kaelor added his tone, a deep thread under Nora's bright line. Not a roar, a foundation. The fleet shifted from effort to ease. They moved like a school of fish that knows the shape of water. Weapons did their work in the right seconds. Breath found the seams where the broodmother's strange skin flickered. Still, the broodmother was vast. Its shield rippled with a patience learned over eons of feeding. Davin read the waveforms and signaled timing cues. Pilots threw their small streaks of light at just the right angles. Dragons poured heat into the cracks without anger, only intent. "Now," Hart said, and the words sounded less like a shout and more like a hand closing over a friend's. The fleet's chorus peaked. The broodmother's shield opened like an eye forced to blink. Kaelor carried a focused payload born of both math and memory, and dove with a calm that made Nora's own breath steady. The strike landed. The dark folded into itself, not with a scream, but with a long exhale. The swarm faltered, lost. The broodmother collapsed into a small, cooling ember that drifted as harmless as old ash. Silence arrived the way snowfall does in thick woods. Then the comms filled with sobbing laughter, prayers, and the ordinary human sounds that come after impossible work has been finished. Nora swayed and would have fallen if not for the harness line. Dr. Okoye met her at the deck with a scanner that declared her uninjured, only emptied. "Rest," he said, voice like a blanket. She slept the better part of 3 days. When she woke, she did not look older, not in the sharp sense, but her eyes held a quieter horizon. She told them what she had felt in the shared song, that the Void Eaters were not born to devour. They had drifted too long without a chorus and forgot their first melody. This did not excuse the harm, but it changed how the fleet planned the future. They would defend firmly, yes, and they would also listen for chances to mend instead of only to break. Years turned like pages. The Ember Vault became a place with gardens and wide halls. Schools taught human children and dragon fledglings in rooms with tall windows. The Bridge Wings worked rescues on storm worlds, planted seed outposts on quiet rocks, and guided trade through difficult lanes. Mistakes still happened. So did apologies. The habit of trust did not make people perfect. It made them resilient. Marshall Davin retired to a small workshop built inside one of the old chain housings. He fixed whistles, clocks, bent tools, and the little annoyances that make life harder than it needs to be. Sometimes he sat with Kaelor at dusk and watched the Ashen Triad glow, and neither of them spoke, because some companionship needs no words. Admiral Hart, still at her station, kept her medals in a drawer she rarely opened. She preferred the daily roll of names on the board. Pilots and dragons paired off to do gentle, practical work. To her, ribbons on jackets were less beautiful than schedules that included time for shared meals. Nora grew taller, then steadier, then simply Nora in full. She served not with a title, but with a presence people trusted. On the 20th remembrance of Havenlight, the old cell block had become a harmony garden full of plants from many worlds, soft moss from rain planets, vines that glowed faint blue, and trees whose leaves clicked together like beads. A long table stood in the center, and upon it, a display case waited. A group of school children filed in, shepherded by a teacher who believed in showing rather than telling. A dragon youngster named Shadegleam walked beside a girl called Mina, who wore 2 braids and a wide grin. They paused at the case as a curator placed 2 objects on the velvet. A tin whistle, its edges worn smooth by small hands, and a slender braid of silver threads, shed scales woven into a cord. Mina pressed her nose to the glass, leaving a smudge the curator did not mind. "Is that the whistle?" she asked. "It is," the curator said. A small breath opened a very large door. Shadegleam tilted his head. "And the silver braid?" "A reminder that strength and gentleness can hold the same space," the curator replied. Nora stood a little way back beside Kaelor, who had not aged in shape, but had grown lighter in spirit. She watched the children and felt the rightness of their easy laughter. She took the whistle from her pocket, not the old one, but another made by Marshall Davin in his workshop, and handed it to Mina. "Play when you are unsure," Nora said. "If the tune is kind, the door you need will hear you." That evening, as lanterns warmed the garden, Kaelor looked over the gathered crowd. Humans leaning against dragons as if they were old stone walls in a town square, and he gave a small, pleased rumble. "We were not the story's destination," he said, voice just for Nora. "We were its bridge." Nora leaned against his warm scales and watched the lantern light shimmer along the silver braid in the case. Beyond the windows, ships traced calm paths, and in the deep dark, no hungry rhythm answered back. Perhaps one day the lost song would return with new notes. Until then, the chorus here was steady and sure. And if a visitor ever asked where the change began, the guide would smile and point not to a battle map, but to the small case in the garden. A whistle and a braid, a breath and a bond, a reminder that love, when sung without hurry, can carry farther than fear ever could.